Abimbola Badejo, otherwise known as BIM.
Yes.
BIM, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. I know you are super, super busy, and at the moment you're preparing for a very long trial.
All right, no problem. Sonia, first of all, it's a pleasure um, speaking to you. My name is Abimbola Badejo. You pronounce my name very well. And I'm a barrister at Five Palm Court, a general common law chambers, which I am fortunate, privileged to be the head of. And I was elected head of chambers on the 15th of September last year. Sorry, forgive me, this year.
This year.
I specialize in all aspects of family and particularly childcare law. I was called to the bar same year as you were called in 1993, the English bar, that is. But in 2013, I decided to go and pursue my educational career in Nigeria. I wanted to qualify in Nigeria. I've always wanted to. Inspired by one of our colleagues, Mr. Ajide Lanleng, who you know very well. So anyway, I got called to the Nigerian bar in November 2014. So as a result of that qualification, I've been doing, well, since then, I've been doing a lot of Nigerian expert evidence work. So I combine the family practice with Nigerian expert evidence work. And that practice, the Nigerian practice, if I can call it that, has really grown because I advise the courts here and individuals here on aspects of Nigerian family law. So it complements my English practice, if I can call it that.
Were you actually born in the UK or in Nigeria?
I was born in London, actually. I was born in St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington.
So was I.
Oh, well, there we go. Now, you see, unlike you, I don't sound like I was born in London. I sound like a Nigerian immigrant. My parents came here round about the sort of Windrush time.
Mm.
I'm not sure they came in on the Empire Windrush boat, but they came on another boat. I know they did. And then we all went back to Nigeria in 19. Sorry, not we all, but I went back with my mother, and my uncle to Nigeria in 1971. So I was just 2 years old when I went back to Nigeria. And I grew up in Nigeria, went to primary school and secondary school in Nigeria, and then I returned to this country in 1986. I then went to a college in Brixton College.
Mm.
I did BTech National in Business and Finance. I didn't want to do A levels for reasons which I wouldn't bore you with. But somebody told me if you do that BTech and you do it well, you can get into university or polytechnic with it. So, and to study law. I've always wanted to study law. So I did BTech, and then I went to university from 89 to 92. I went to what was Wolverhampton Polytechnic. It became a university in 1992. So I had a university degree, but from a polytechnic. If you know what I mean.
Me too. I went to South Bank Poly.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yeah.
And so, do you come from a family of lawyers?
No, I am the first, and I believe only lawyer in my family.
And you said that you always wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Why?
You know, you're going to laugh at this. But in Nigeria, we used to watch all these British programs, okay? With all these lawyers in their fancy gear, wearing the wig and the gown. And so I thought to myself, this sounds like a good job to do. And then I went to secondary school and I met this chap whose father was the Court of Appeal president, the first Court of Appeal president in Nigeria. His father was like Lord Denning, and he used to come to school in those days with lots of legal books. And I got reading. I thought, let's read some of this. And I read some of them, and I kind of developed an interest in law from that age, the age of 14. So it's what I've always wanted to do. And sometimes I think it always helps if you know what you want to do from an early age, and then you just pursue it. Yeah.
You are the head of chambers of 5 Pump Court, which is a huge achievement. But you've had an unconventional route, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
So you are qualified as a barrister and a solicitor, both in the UK and in Nigeria.
Correct.
And you were called to the bar 1993.
Correct.
But you didn't take a straight path to becoming head of chambers. Please describe your path.
You're very correct. So I did pupillage at 5 Pump Court. That was from October 93 until I think, well, we finished in October 2024 technically. So they made the decision on tenancy. And you may recall, when we went to the bar and were called, 1993, 94 was not a very good year for people, for barristers generally. Legal aid cuts, a lot of excuses, but I didn't get taken on. I happened to be in chambers with about 4 other pupils, all excellent pupils who are doing well in their own right now. And we were competing against one gentleman who'd been around for 5 years. So I didn't think.
When you say he'd been or she'd been, yeah, he'd been around for 5 years, what do you mean by that?
He'd been squatting in various chambers for about 5 years. So unluckily for myself and my contemporaries then, he joined chambers around about the same time as, I think he came in as a, what you call a third sixth with a view or something, a squatter. Well, he wasn't a pupil, he was a squatter. So we were up against him. So I knew I wasn't going to get taken on. I knew it.
Because he'd accumulated a lot more experience.
Had it
been at the bar 5 years.
Yeah, he was 5 years ahead of us. So I knew I wasn't going to get taken on. So when I was told by my pupil supervisor, he asked me to wait for him in a pub. So I waited for him. He came to see me in the pub with his decision. I said, "Oh, sorry, Ben, we haven't taken you on, but you can stay on and squat with us." So I squatted in chambers, I think, until about May 1995. I then joined a set of chambers you may or may not be aware of, called Britton Street Chambers.
I remember. Yes, I do remember those chambers.
Mr. Marvin Gedron,
yes,
of memory, gave lots of people of color a lot of chances in those days. So I wanted to continue in practice at the bar, and somebody mentioned his chambers to me. I went to see him, and he goes, "Yeah, come and join us." So I joined the set of chambers. What Mr. Gedron did was to say, "Look, this is where you can build a platform. You can build your practice from here." So, but as a young barrister, yes, I had some contacts, but they were not enough to feed me, right? So I took the decision to look elsewhere, where I could pursue the interest which I had in housing and property, which is what I wanted to do. So I joined the local authority, Islington Council, as their in-house advocate. I spent a couple of years there. So that was from 95 to 97. And then around about October, November 97, I left Islington and I moved across to Camden. I was promoted to head of housing litigation at Camden. And I occupied that position until I left Camden. I left Camden. I was headhunted by a city firm because they had a social housing practice, but it was no contentious. It was just purely transactional work. And I've got to say to you, I was working in local government. I was on a salary, and I was doing so much work that I thought, it's time to go somewhere else and maximize earning potentials, right? So when this opportunity came along from this city firm, it used to be called Lawrence Graham. They've now merged with a few other firms. I think they're now called RAG LP or something. I can't remember. But anyway, so I joined, I went for this interview. The partner then, he knew that I was very keen on advocacy. So the first thing he said to me was, "Look, Ben, let me just tell you, if you join us, you will never set foot in court."
Oh, no.
And that's what he said. because I was joining a practice where they did purely transactional work, but with housing, right? Just to in a nutshell, what we were doing was we were transferring housing, local authority housing, to social landlords. So I did that sort of work. I never done transactional housing work in my life. So the guy said to me, look, just join. If you join us, we'll show you the ropes, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I joined Lawrence Graham, I think in February 2004. And the partners, he got me involved in one particular transaction. So he just said, look, Ben, read this agreement and tell me, just pick up 200 problems that you can find with the agreement. I've never done this before, right? So I started reading. Well, one way or the other, I was able to spot some issues because I like contract law, which also helps. Long and short of it was, he then took me to all these transaction meetings, and on the day of completion, he just made himself scarce. Okay, he went to the opera with his wife, and he left me to complete the transaction. Now, you're laughing, and I thought, what a wicked man, what a wicked thing to do. But in fact, he did it deliberately because he wanted me to handle those transactions so that going forward, I could in effect take over those transactions. So,
and also it showed that he had faith in you. He knew you could do it.
I mean, when I left Lawrence Graham after 2 years, because I was headhunted by another firm, he said to me, Bim, that day when I left you to deal with that transaction, I thought to myself, let me drop you in the ocean, let me see whether you can float. And you floated very well. I got so many good feedback about you. So basically, he transferred all the transactions to me. So that kept me very busy for 2 years. And at that stage, I got myself into, well, I didn't. They got me into Chambers and Partners. I got into Chambers and Partners in 2006 for the first time. And I was rated as the best assistant on the market for the kind of work that I was doing. Now, because of that, once you get that exposure, people begin to look at you. So one particular firm came for me. I just went to a conference, and they said, "Oh, Bim, how nice to see you. We've been looking forward to having a chat with you." So I said, "Oh, what about?" And they started talking. They were very complimentary about me, and I thought, what are these people playing at? So they said, "Oh, we're not being kind. We are business people. So we would like to have a word with you at a convenient moment." So I thought, what are they all about? So anyway, to cut long story short, I went to see them. And they kind of made me an offer which I couldn't refuse. Now, Sonia, just remember how we started. We had to write all these applications, send thousands of CVs, but for 2 jobs in a row, I've basically been invited to have discussions, right? So we have discussions, then make offers, we shake hands, okay? So that's what happened there. So I joined this firm called Bertram Dyson Bell in Westminster. It's a Westminster firm. So
and were you doing the same sort of work, transactional?
Same transactional housing work.
No advocacy?
No advocacy at all, just a pure transaction work. So from Bertram Dyson Bell, we had an issue with Bertram Dyson Bell. So we didn't, myself and the partner didn't think it was going to work there. So we moved the practice to another Westminster firm called Winkworth Sherwood, where my then partner used to work. He was the senior partner many years before. So he went back to his old stomping ground. Sadly, that work began to dry up around about 2008. And around about that time, I began to think, I enjoy this transactional work, but actually, I want to be a barrister again, if that makes sense. Yes? So it was, in fact, while I was doing all this transactional work that I qualified as a solicitor, because those firms wanted me to become a partner. You had to become a partner. Sorry, you had to become a solicitor to become a partner.
Yes.
So they sponsored me and paid for me to do the what is the qualified lawyers transfer test. So I did that exam, I think, in 2007, and qualified as a solicitor then.
Now, I understand that you went to Arden Chambers. after that,
Yes,
correct?
indeed, you're absolutely right. So I had to shake hands with Winkwood Sherwood in about December 2009 because the work simply had dried up. There was a capacity issue in terms of what I was delivering, and I knew that. So we had a gentleman's agreement, and we shook hands, and I left. I left in around about this time in 2008. And of course, because I had lots of contacts, I just picked up the phone and spoke to my contacts at Arden Chambers. I joined them on the 1st of July 2009. But what they did, if I'm allowed to say this, the clerks diverted me from being a landlord guy. I came in as a landlord guy, all right? But they diverted my practice in the direction of the tenants.
Yes, and I remember we had a conversation around that time, and I recall that it was quite a difficult experience for you at Arden Chambers. Is that correct?
I mean, it was a good set. It really was a good set. But to be very honest, I thought to myself that being in a housing set was quite restrictive. Okay. Politics is politics, right? So the politics wasn't even the issue. But I was very concerned about being in a set of chambers that just restricted me. Okay. So I decided that I needed a common law set where I could do other things apart from just the housing. Don't get me wrong, I like the housing. I did well in it. When I joined Arden, I joined Arden in July. By August, I'd already had a reported case. So August of that year, I had a reported case. So I liked housing and knew what I was doing.
You then had a full circle moment because you left Arden Chambers and you went back to Five Pump Court, the chambers where you had done your pupillage and not obtained tenancy, correct?
Correct. So once I decided I wanted a general common law set, I just approached the chambers. I had a word with I didn't even bother with the barristers. I just spoke to the senior clerk because I knew him, So he said, "Oh, okay, show me your figures." I mean, I'd had figures, yeah. I'd done a year.
Now, when you say figures, what do you mean by that for people who don't understand?
Figures, forgive me, that means your work done report, your age debt, and your payment summary.
So basically, how much money you had earned, how much money was outstanding, owed to you, and so forth. Okay.
Correct. So again, I showed him those figures. He lined up an interview with somebody. So I had one discussion with one gentleman, a lovely gentleman. And before I knew it, I got a phone call saying, "Oh yeah, come and join us." So I returned to Five Pump Court in November 2010. Again, doing lots of housing work, but I was able to do other things like probate, for example, personal injury, consumer credit, all that kind of work. So, seeing different areas of law. Okay. But then something happened. We were doing lots of local authority work, but I was the one doing most of it on the housing side. So when we then tendered to go back on what's called the LBLA, I don't know if I'm allowed to say all these things, but anyway, they simply did not renew our tender. So that was the beginning of the start of the departure from housing. And also around about that time, 2012, 2011, this conservative government introduced some swinging cuts to legal aid. Swinging cuts to legal aid. So I had a quick conversation with my family clerk. So family clerk said, "Look, my friend, there's lots of work. If you want to do this area of work, let's just, we can develop you." So I went to Nigeria in 2013, did the law school, came back 2014, August. And then 1st of January 2015, I began to do family law, childcare law full time. So that's how we get to where we get to now. I was advised by our good friend Jidelan Lane that this Nigerian qualification is actually quite important. We can get lots of other work in England. So he advised me that it's a good idea to get into doing expert evidence work. And I'm extremely grateful to him, as well as to another barrister who I think I will mention, Mr. Oba Usube, KC, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who is the head of chambers at Three Pump Court. He's a very good friend of mine. We go back many, many, many years. But one day he just rang me and said, "So, Bim, I know you're trying to get into this expert evidence field. Look, I've got this job. I just haven't got the capacity. And I've told the solicitors they can trust you." So I did the opinion sometime in 2015. And the thing is, once you've done one opinion and you can put that on your CV to say, "Look, I've done one opinion," that's it. So I did that one opinion. I did that opinion in 2015. I did some in 2016, but it really, really kicked off in 2017 when I did an opinion, when I did opinions in 2 separate cases, which are now reported cases on recognition of Nigerian adoption laws in the UK. So that was based on the work that I did on 2 cases. Both were reported, both had the same barristers on both sides. On the first one, I wasn't called to give evidence. On the second one, somebody thought, let's wind this guy up. So they called me, the Home Office called me in and asked me to give evidence, which I did. And I survived, But the rest is history. As from then on, the rest is history. Yeah?
Do you enjoy family law?
I do. The only problem I've got with family law is that it is very, very paper heavy. If you're doing children work, it's very paper heavy. You've got all these reports to read.
So at the beginning of this interview, I said that you've had an unconventional route to becoming head of chambers.
Yes.
And being back at the bar. Can you just, in a nutshell, tell us what were the challenges that you encountered?
I think the challenges actually started when we all went to university. Yeah. You went to a polytechnic, I went to a polytechnic. So we didn't have parents feeding us money that allowed us to go and do all this work experience, which everyone else had to do. Okay. So that's the first problem. When you finish your degree and then you go to law school, you're competing against people who have been able to establish lots of links everywhere. So it's much easier. So if you remember, when we were at bar school, very few of us were able to secure pupillage, if you remember. So that was the challenge. How am I going to get this pupillage? And then I did very well in the exams, didn't I?
I remember, yes, you did.
So that always helps. So I was able to, I think, secure work experience at Westminster Council, again, via contacts. Somebody I knew was working there. So she was leaving. She goes, "Let me introduce you to the solicitors." Introduced me. They took me on, and very, very kind solicitors. They knew that I was looking for pupillage. They had contacts. So when I said to them I applied to one particular set, one of them said, "Oh, I know somebody there. I'll just make a phone call." Right? So he made a phone call, but I went for the interview. In fact, I went for 2 interviews. Okay. One was what is now 9 Bedford Row and 5 Pump Court. I got both of them. Okay. But this was between law school and the start of pupillage in October. So we'd done law school, we got the results, and then we were starting pupillage in October, right? So that's one challenge, not having the contact. 2, just not having the pupillage secured. And then when you get the pupillage, I've got to say to you, I joined what was then a very stuffy set of chambers. It was Oxford, Cambridge. Everybody was Oxford, Cambridge. I was the only person from a polytechnic. That in itself is a challenge. Okay? I was the only black person there. There was an Asian lady, but I was the only black person there. The Asian lady was a tenant. So again, that was a challenge, right? I'm not suggesting that there was anything untoward, okay? But it was a challenge. That's as far as I can put it.
And then obtaining tenancy wasn't just about how good you were as a barrister or your potential. It was all about how you would fit into chambers.
Exactly. Every time you went for an interview, the first question when you're asked to ask them, what are you looking for? And they'll say to you, oh, we're looking for somebody who can fit in, really. And that's it. So that word is very coded. You don't even know what it means, right? And when they ask you, oh, how many of your, you asked me, this first question you asked me was, am I the first member of, how many lawyers are in my family? Or am I the first in my family? You asked me that question, right? They used to ask those questions during interviews. And you used to think, oh, yeah, I'm the first one. That's it. Forget it. Forget it. Once you say that, you've already ticked a negative box, okay? And that's the reality, because in those days, they used to discriminate on parental status.
Mm.
They used to. They can't now, but they used to in those days.
Mm.
So that was the problem. So you make it to interview based on your CV, and then you get there, you say the wrong thing. That's it. Forget it. Okay. So again, that was the challenge. Now, in terms of the practice, let me be honest. Right. I have to be honest. I have been lucky, but at the same time, you have to work hard. So you have to make your own luck. Okay. So
no, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. You haven't been lucky. You are extremely intelligent and talented and hardworking, and that's the reason why you have been able to. And also, you're also really, really nice. You're a nice person, so you don't tend to burn bridges. And so you've been able to cultivate relationships over the years, and people do remember you fondly. And so I think I don't think it has anything to do with luck.
I suppose that's why I say you have to make your own luck. Those are the things you've got to build up those things, and then it pays off in the end. It does pay off. This is the point I'm making. Yeah. So I mean, you've got to give. It's a lot of hard work, really hard work.
So you've talked about the challenge starting from bar school, not having the contacts and so forth. And you talked about the challenges you faced when you were a pupil, not coming from the right background as such.
Yeah.
Any other challenges?
I think finance was a big challenge. I mean, I almost didn't go to that law school, believe you me, because I didn't have the money.
Yeah.
So finance was a challenge. And in the end, I had to go and see my MP. And I went to see her. She wrote a nice letter on my behalf. And my local authority then paid my fees.
Who was your MP?
Harriet Hammond, who is, I think, standing down at the next election.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So I went to see her. She wrote me a wonderful letter. Sorry, she wrote a wonderful letter on my behalf to the local authority, which she sent to me. So when I did the exams and I got a good grade, I got called to the bar. I took a picture of my name in the Times, and I wrote her a nice letter to say, thank you very much, Miss Hammond, for all the work you did. And she sent a letter back saying, oh, come on, I didn't do anything. It's all down to you, you know? So she helped, because the problem is, if I just remind you, in those days, you had to have your funding for the school fees sorted out, as well as funding for the banks will not give you any money if you didn't pay the school fees. When I say give, lend. They won't lend you any money unless you can pay the school fees. So I applied for all these loans. They all said no until I was able to have my fees paid. So once my fees got paid, the banks then gave me a nice loan. So I finished bar school with a massive overdraft of about 12 grand. But again, that's all history. We've paid all that money off. It's all history.
When you were actually on your feet practicing as a barrister, what challenges did you face, if any, from judges and or your opponents and clients?
I mean, I was on my feet, by the way, when I was in local government. I was on my feet from 95 until about 2004. So I did lots of advocacy. There was the snobbery of being, we experienced the snobbery of being an in-house advocate. So you'd get talked down to by opponents as well as judges, some of whom will say, why are you appearing in my court road? but they didn't know the rules, because the rules allowed you to appear as an employed barrister up to a certain level. Okay, so you could appear in the county court as an employed barrister. So what I did, because the snobbery was getting a bit too much, I applied for higher rights of audience. Okay, and that was granted. So I used to go into the High Court representing my employer, the law number of Camden. So again, when I got there, the snobbery, I faced lots of snobbery, right? I've met one or two in my time as doing this job. I've met one or two judges who I would say, not very pleasant. Okay, but the way I conduct myself, I think I make sure that I don't put myself in a position where I'm having to argue with a judge. Okay, for this reason, my pupil master, the criminal pupil master, a gentleman called Mr. Crispin Cartwright, who's now retired. He taught me a lot of courtroom manner and decorum. Okay, starting from when you set foot in the court, how you interact with the ushers. Okay,
very important.
He taught me that. He said, "Look, Bim, don't ever go into any court and look down on the ushers. It's not my style anyway." But he taught me that. So I saw the way he was, and it was a very nice quality that I picked up from him. So in terms of how he spoke to the ushers, in terms of how he addressed the judges, even when he's facing a barrage of criticism from the bench, he just kept his cool and conducted himself in a very appropriate way. And really, that's how I operate as well. Okay, so I haven't had all these experiences which I have read some of my colleagues have had. Okay, some snide remarks or whatever. I've had maybe just one or two in the time that I've been on my feet. So I can't complain. And in fact, when I was in employed practice, I had one or two judges encourage me to apply to become a deputy district judge. But I didn't think I wanted to do that at that stage. So I had people that would have written references for me who are from the bench.
Do you think that becoming a judge is in your future?
To be honest, it is on my radar.
All right, so I think finally what I'd like you to do is to give some advice to any aspiring barrister.
Okay. Starting point is please don't do it because mom and dad say you should do it, or because your friends are doing it. Do it because it's what you really want to do. It will make life incredibly easier if you're doing something which you want to do. So that's the starting point. Second advice is you do need to build some links, right? You have to use lots of initiative at this stage. So get yourself some work experience. Write letters to all these solicitors. Say, can I come for a week or two? I don't need paying. Let me just see how things go. Go to court. Go and sit behind and watch. You might meet a barrister there or a solicitor who might open doors for you. Yeah. The other point is obviously the academic stage. You have to excel there. Yeah. So people say, oh, your degree doesn't matter. I'm afraid it does, because the competition is intense. So your grades opens the door for you. And that's always been my guiding principle. So I've always said to myself, I want to make sure that I've got to put myself one step ahead. So I thought the way to do that is to get the good grades. And I've been extremely fortunate in that respect. So university 2-1, bar school, very competent, etc. So I'm not saying everybody's going to get that, but please, if you can, try and do that. Try your best.
And one piece of advice I would always give is to try to be a well-rounded person. So you also have to have interests outside of the law. And I know you do, because you are a DJ You swim almost every day, I believe, which is why you're still so trim. So you're DJing from home, I believe.
I've always liked to be a DJ. To be honest, I thought if I didn't become a lawyer, I'd be a DJ. So yes, I have a mixer, and I've got a nice, good laptop, nice speaker downstairs. So I like a good mix.
What kind of music?
It's R&B mainly, and these days Afrobeat is whatever they call it. Yeah. Let me be honest. I like hip hop as well.
I love hip hop, of course.
I do like hip hop.
But you didn't mention reggae. What's going on?
I'm afraid you're going to be extremely disappointed with me. I have never been a fan of reggae. Can I say why? Because I find reggae slightly monotonous, rather like Afrobeat now. The beat, I find it's very similar, and so I've not been a fan of reggae.
I'm ending our friendship here. This is where it ends.
I know that you're passionate about that, but I can't please everyone. Sonia.
All right, my friend, anyway. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out to be interviewed. I'm going to leave you to get on with your preparation for trial.
Thank you so much, Sonia.